Welcome to the latest edition of the Clutch Pearl podcast. Again, I'm your host, Noah Carter. It's going to be a little bit of a special edition, with it being Christmas Eve. I figured I would throw a little bit of a Christmas theme in it. I'm going to give you my three college basketball wishes for Santa Claus this year. I'm going to talk a little bit about the number one debacle. Should it even be a debacle? And lastly, I'm going to give you a quick Illinois Mizzou recap and our Clutch Pearl segment. And that's going to be all today. We're going to try to keep it short, sweet, concise, and have a little fun talking some basketball. So, first, my three college basketball wishes for Santa Claus. Number one, recently, Dan Hurley's been in the news again, this time targeting podcasters saying, saying that uh, I bet no stupid podcasters thought we were going to be 10-3. Well, we kind of did. Maybe 9-4, but I think we all thought 10-3. They beat a overrated Baylor team by 4 at home. Uh, they beat Gonzaga in basically a home environment at Madison Square Garden. That was also a milestone win for Coach Hurley. So kind of expected they would win there, at least keep it close. Um, they beat Rodney Terry's Texas team. Congratulations. Uh, and they played a bunch of nobodies. Shout out to Greg Waddell of Sleepers Media. He really took a deep dive into this and laid it out really well. I saw it on Twitter last night. I hadn't got a chance to watch the video yet, but I saw a clip of it. And I mean, he just went after Coach Hurley over this and he did great. So my wish there is that Dan Hurley just to please go back what you do best. And that's focusing on college basketball rather than the media. I mean, he's always been a guy that, used a little fuel, but I feel like since he went after that Lakers job and then ended up ultimately turning it down, uh, he's really targeted the media for some reason. I don't know if he's insecure about his team not being as good as the past couple of years or what, but so yeah, we wish that. My second wish is one for next year, and that's so we get more college basketball games the week of Christmas. Every year we have a fantastic feast week during Thanksgiving week of fantastic basketball games uh, throughout college basketball, whether it's tournaments and the MTEs or situations, where it's more of a just a four-team event, more of a showcase. Uh, we want more of the week of Christmas. We get the NBA this year. We get NFL on Netflix. Kind of curious to see how that goes. We want to see some college basketball. I mean, how awesome would it be, for example, to see the aforementioned UConn take on Kansas at Madison Square Garden on Christmas Day or on Christmas Eve? So more of those games like that highlight. I know they want to give the guys a little break on Christmas, but I think it would be cool to see more games Christmas week rather than seeing this week-long break for a lot of the big basketball teams. And lastly, I want the officials to start letting teams play again like we used to. We saw it early on and we talked about it in a couple podcasts ago about the Wisconsin Arizona game, how brutal it was. John Chanji scored 41 points and had more points at the free throw line than he did from the field. Uh, the Mizzou Illinois game that we just watched was absolutely brutal. We'll get into that a little bit more, but there were more fouls than minutes played. I mean, it was it's becoming a brutal watch, and we saw it in the Illinois Tennessee game as well. There's certain situations where there was one situation I keep going back to. I see it on Twitter. Merez Johnson was mostly straight up, maybe bumped the player a little bit, but uh, and they call a foul on it, and I mean, in a game like that, it's a rivalry game, excuse me. Let the guys play a little bit. Let's see some toughness. Both teams are known for their grittiness. Coach Gates, good coach. Coach Underwood's a good coach. Both guys like toughness. like battle for the boards, like strong-minded defensive players. So why not in a game like that? Let them play a little bit. Let them shove around. Instead, we got Coach Gates running halfway on the floor while Merez Johnson's getting thrown to the floor by Peyton Marshall that gets a no call because all the focus was on Coach Gates being at the free throw line meeting a referee in the face, getting a technical foul. And these three games are just what I've mentioned. They're not alone. It's been pretty well everywhere, and it's not really good to see. I would rather watch just a clean basketball game that doesn't take 3.5 hours because they're calling fouls left and right. So now my second segment. Now that we're done with Santa Claus, Auburn versus Tennessee. Should this be a debate at number one? You know, I see it as why does it need to be a debate? The AP had Tennessee number one. They should stay number one. I know Auburn and all the metrics is higher, but who cares? Is how I see it. I don't know why everybody's all over the place complaining about it. Why don't we just appreciate two really great teams at the top of the poll there with Tennessee and Auburn? Let's respect them. Let's see them go at it later in the season. It's all going to play out eventually. And here's the thing: four teams get a number one seed at the end of the year. So what's it matter one versus two? Really don't. A lot of times the second overall number one seed uh, really gets the worst end of the draw, and the AP poll has nothing to do with seeding anyway. It's something for us media members to talk about, and that's always fun to see. But let's just appreciate it. Remember the Gonzaga, Baylor, Illinois year, where Illinois did lose to Loyola Chicago. We were all expecting a Baylor, Illinois Final Four game, and the winner taking on Gonzaga. And in that game, Baylor and Gonzaga was an instant classic that Baylor came out on top. And you know, uh, it's just appreciate having multiple great teams. There's a lot of good teams. We didn't know at the beginning of the year if there was going to be any great teams. Right now, we're seeing two teams that are great, and they're both very old. So who knows if they'll be the great teams at the end of the year? Because a lot of times the teams that are younger, um, like UConn last year, didn't start ranked at, you know, top of the line. And as the year progressed, they got better and better. They had young guys coming into roles like Klingon. Um, so it's uh, not just Klingon. They also had Stephon Castle, freshman. Um, but so, the longer that goes on, teams will really start to separate. But early on in the year, we have two clear leaders. Let's not worry about who's number one, who's number two. Let's just appreciate both. That's how I see it. All right, now to the Mizzou, Illinois recap. I'm not going to talk a lot about the officials. I kind of touched on that, and I'm trying to be positive here on Christmas Eve. Um, so let's go with number one. Kasparis Jackson, awesome. The main reason Illinois won that game. And I know you got to live with the turnovers from him. And I know I said I'm mostly going to be positive, but one negative I have, he's got to find a way to limit these turnovers late. Cost him against Tennessee, about cost him against Mizzou if it wasn't for shooting heroics. So, like I said, you kind of got to live with it because of how great of a shooter he is and how high a volume he is. But he's got like a 25% turnover rate. That's got to come down. And I think it will. I think a lot of it is, freshmen. And I think the longer the season goes on, we're already seeing it some. Um, we're going to see Kylan Boswell handle a little more. But Kylan said it at the end of the game press conference. And I mean, part of that's just a teammate being a teammate. But he says, Kasparis is the best point guard in the country. And Kasparis is given a lot of pressure on that to not be true. Braden Smith, Dylan Harper, both giving him a run for his money. To me, those three are the clear-cut best three right now. And You can really make an argument for all three at number one, two, and three. But you know, what's going to separate Kasparis if he can find a way to limit those turnovers late in the game? He limits those. He's already an elite closer. Um, excuse me. He limits those, and all of a sudden, there's not much of a debate. He is number one, especially with Dylan not being on as good of a team. Excuse me again, as Kasparis is, and Braden same way, and with them struggling a little bit. And Braden's just not as good of a shot maker. He can get his own shot as good, if not better, with his quickness and his ability to fade away. But truthfully, he doesn't make as many. Kasparis, and it's unbelievable that those step backs. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Uh, so number two, what's Mark Mitchell doing there, taking that shot? Uh, it was kind of a interesting ending to a phenomenal basketball game. Both teams played well, played hard. Mitchell's a good player, but he's more of a drill driver, as we kind of talked about in the last episode. So I'm not sure why he's taking off the dribble three there. At the end of the game, they're only down 2 points. He could have drove to the rim, got fouled, had two free throws, or there was also another player in the corner that's a better shooter than him that could have taken that three there. But it happened, and I guess you got to live with it because he is their best player. But you got to think that Dennis Gates was kind of shaking his head there. He probably doesn't want Mark Mitchell taking that shot in that situation there. Number three, Coach Underwood finally went away from Hum Rickhouse there. He only played 20 minutes and went to more Merez and DGL. When he went to DGL, it was moving White to the four, playing a three-guard lineup, essentially Kasparis at the three, even though he handles it. Um, so the question is, do we see more of this, or was it more matchup based? I think it was more matchup based. Mizzou plays a lot of three small guard lineups with Mitchell and Marshall and any other big that's not coming to my brain right now. Sorry about that, because he is the starter over Marshall. But so it was kind of a situation where it was definitely matchup based for both of them. I will say the Merez thing we might see more of in Big Ten play just because most teams play two bigs in the Big Ten this year. And I think DGL, when Illinois plays Purdue at the end of the year, we're going to see a lot more DGL, probably a lot less Merez in that one. So I think right now, and we'll get into it with the last question, it's more of just kind of a rotational situation, playing the matchups, trying to find that fifth guy. And that's what leads me into the last one, as I mentioned. Okay, so lastly, the big question is, as I mentioned, you know, KJ and Big T are who they are. Boswell and White have settled in perfectly. That's why they hung with Tennessee. Should have beat Tennessee. That's why they beat Mizzou. KJ made some big shots, but um, without Boswell and White, probably don't win that game. And I think you're going to see that the rest of the year. I think it's going to lead Illinois to a Big Ten regular season championship behind those four guys. Who's the fifth guy going to be? Like I said, we saw in the last one, DGL and Rez kind of rotate in there with Humrick House, Riley, even a little Jake Davis and Kerry Booth. So it's been kind of a revolving door. But I think the longer the season goes, they really need to find somebody. The guy needs to be Will Riley for Illinois to hit their complete ceiling, excuse me, as a title contender. But right now, I don't know if we're going to see it. Will's really struggling from a shooting standpoint. And as Coach Underwood said, in the post game, I told Will if he sees him pass up another shot, uh, he's gonna have him. He needs to shoot it, and that's what you got to do as a coach with a young player like that. Got to tell him to keep shooting it. And Chicago State should be a good game for him to hopefully find that shooting stroke back. Humrick House as well. Um, if Will can find that shooting stroke that he had at the beginning of the year, this Illinois team ain't gonna lose very much. Plain and simple, because you still have those guys to to play matchup and situation. But Will's also, I mean, he was getting subbed in as a defensive replacement late in the game. I don't think anybody ever thought Will Riley was going to be that guy, but he's kind of turned into that guy. So if he can knock down shots, I mean, that's the perfect role player around KJ, around Big T, around White, and around Boswell. So lastly, clutching pearls situation here for the podcast. KJ's shot making in that game is what clutched my pearls, plain and simple. That's that step back three late. I was so pumped up. I gave my fiance a high five and her hand was stinging for a little bit. I hit it pretty hard on accident. And she went up for the high five and I was like, yeah. And I didn't even realize I did. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But and then that turnaround jumper to win it. I mean, that's just a tough shot. That's an NBA level shot, and it's ice in his veins. Uh, Even with the turnovers, it's just he just flat clutches pearls for the Illini. That's all for this edition of the Clutch Pearl podcast. As I mentioned, I'm Noah Carter. Give us a follow on Twitter, also on TikTok, and like and subscribe. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.